Have you ever wondered how our modern world, with its interconnected economies and diverse cultures, actually came to be? The answer, in large part, lies in a fascinating and complex chapter of history known as the Atlantic world. Forget thinking about continents as separate entities. From the late 5th-10th century to the early 19th century, Europe, Africa, and the Americas became linked in an unprecedented web of exchange, conflict, and transformation. This wasn't just about ships crossing an ocean. It was the birth of a new global age. And today, we're going to unpack it all. So what exactly is the Atlantic world? Imagine the Atlantic Ocean not as a barrier, but as a massive, bustling highway. On this highway, ships carried not just people, but also goods, plants, animals, diseases, and most importantly, ideas. It all kicked off with the voyages of European explorers like Columbus, who were searching for new trade routes to Asia. What they found instead was a new world, and their arrival set in motion a chain of events that would forever change the course of human history. Let's start with the empires. Powers like Spain, Portugal, Britain, France, and the Netherlands were the major players. Fueled by a desire for wealth, power, and religious conversion, they established vast colonial empires across the Americas. Spain and Portugal carved up Central and South America, extracting immense fortunes in silver and gold. Think of the legendary silver mines of Potosi in modern-day Bolivia. This single mountain financed the Spanish Empire for centuries. Meanwhile, the British, French, and Dutch focused more on North America and the Caribbean, establishing colonies based on agriculture, fur trading, and strategic control. These empires weren't just political entities. They were massive economic projects designed to enrich the home country. This system, known as mercantilism, was all about maximizing exports and minimizing imports, with the colonies serving as sources of raw materials and markets for finished goods. This imperial expansion led to one of the most significant and often misunderstood aspects of the Atlantic world, the Columbian Exchange. This term describes the widespread transfer of plants, animals, culture, human populations, technology, and ideas between the Americas, West Africa, and the Old World. It was a two-way street, but the traffic was far from equal. From the Americas, Europe received game-changing crops like potatoes, maize, or corn, tomatoes, and cacao. Can you even imagine Italian food without tomatoes, or Irish history without the potato? These crops revolutionized European agriculture and led to a population boom. In the other direction, Europeans brought wheat, rice, sugarcane, and domestic animals like horses, cattle, and pigs to the Americas. The introduction of the horse, in particular, transformed the lives of many Native American groups on the Great Plains, changing the way they hunted and fought. However, the Columbian Exchange had a devastatingly dark side. Europeans also brought diseases to which the indigenous peoples of the Americas had no immunity. Smallpox, measles, and influenza swept through the continents, causing a catastrophic decline in the native population. Some estimates suggest that up to 90% of the indigenous population perished. This demographic collapse is one of the greatest tragedies in human history, and it created a massive labor shortage in the colonies, particularly on the lucrative sugar and tobacco plantations. This brings us to the most tragic and brutal component of the Atlantic world, the transatlantic slave trade. To solve the labor crisis, European empires turned to Africa. Over a period of about 350 years, more than 12 million Africans were forcibly captured, chained, and transported across the Atlantic in horrific conditions on what became known as the Middle Passage. They were sold into slavery, primarily to work on plantations in Brazil, the Caribbean, and North America, producing commodities like sugar, cotton, and tobacco for European markets. This system, often called the triangular trade, linked the three continents in a cycle of exploitation. European goods were traded for enslaved Africans, who were then transported to the Americas to produce raw materials, which were then shipped back to Europe to be manufactured into finished goods. The profits were astronomical, and they fueled the Industrial Revolution in Europe. The human cost, however, was immeasurable, creating legacies of suffering, racism, and inequality that persist to this day. But the Atlantic world wasn't just about economics and exploitation. It was also a crucible of cultural creation. In the ports and plantations of the Americas, people from Europe, Africa, and the Americas came into contact, and new hybrid cultures were born. This process, known as creolization, blended languages, religions, music, food, and social customs. Think of the development of Creole languages in places like Haiti and Louisiana, which mix European and African linguistic elements. Consider the syncretic religions like Voodoo in Haiti or Candomblé in Brazil, which fuse African spiritual traditions with Catholic saints and rituals. The rhythms of African music, carried across the ocean, laid the groundwork for countless modern genres, from jazz and blues to samba and reggae. The food we eat, the music we listen to, the very fabric of many societies in the Americas is a direct result of these complex cultural encounters. And then came the revolutions. The ideas flowing across the Atlantic weren't just about religion or culture. They were also about politics and freedom. The Enlightenment, an intellectual movement that championed reason, liberty, and individual rights, blossomed in Europe. Thinkers like John Locke wrote about natural rights to life, liberty, and property. These radical ideas crossed the ocean and found fertile ground in the American colonies, where colonists were growing increasingly frustrated with British rule and taxation without representation. The result? The American Revolution. This wasn't just a local squabble. It was a world-changing event. The success of the American colonies in winning their independence sent shockwaves back across the Atlantic. It inspired the French Revolution, which toppled a monarchy with the cry of liberty, equality, fraternity. And the revolutionary fire didn't stop there. Inspired by both the American and French examples, enslaved people in the French colony of Saint-Domingue rose up in a massive rebellion. Led by figures like Toussaint Louverture, they fought and defeated the French, Spanish, and British armies, establishing the independent nation of Haiti in 1804. The Haitian Revolution was the first and only successful slave revolt to lead to the formation of a new nation, a powerful testament to the universal desire for freedom. These Atlantic revolutions, feeding off one another, signaled the beginning of the end for the old imperial order and the birth of a new era of nation-states and democratic ideals. So when we look back at the Atlantic world, we see a story of incredible complexity. It was an age of empire building and immense wealth, but also of brutal exploitation and unimaginable suffering. It sparked a global exchange that reshaped diets and landscapes, but also unleashed deadly pandemics. It created vibrant new cultures while destroying others. It was the engine of global capitalism and the cradle of modern revolutionary thought. Understanding the Atlantic world is crucial because its legacies are all around us. The economic connections, the cultural diversity, the political ideals, and the deep-seated inequalities that define our modern world were all forged in the crucible of the Atlantic between the 5th, 10th, and 19th centuries. It's a reminder that history is never simple, and the story of how our world came to be is a story of connection, conflict, and constant change. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the Atlantic world. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations into the stories that shaped our world. Let me know in the comments what part of this history surprised you the most. See you next time.